Okay, hello Rita. Thank you for coming here.
Hello, Miguel. Nice to be here.
Okay, let's start with one question. Could you make a general evaluation of Navarro's program here?
I think the Navarra program here has been inspiring. It's very unusual for a Chamber of Commerce to be so proactive in its approach towards helping the companies that it works with develop real managerial capability. I think one of the things that really holds a lot of smaller companies back, or companies that are perhaps not in a major city, is that people don't have a network, people don't know what the latest techniques are, sometimes they don't know where some of the great ideas are. So, for example, in this program, we have a large number of participants with an interest in clean technologies, and green technologies, and sustainable technologies, and we've been able to create some conversations with them around what are world-class best practice that they can then use to leverage their own capabilities in that area. So it's been pretty inspiring. I would also say that the support the Chamber's given us has really allowed us to not worry so much about the context or the environment, and really focus on the educational experience with the participants. For me personally, I didn't quite know what to expect when they said, oh, it's a Chamber of Commerce and it's these small companies, but these are very sophisticated organizations, so it's been a really pleasant surprise.
Thank you. Okay, let's go with the second. How can we make our enterprises be more innovative?
Well, the question of how you get organizations to become more innovative is one of those real holy grail questions I get asked a lot. I think the first thing to realize is you don't need to be perfect. Just being a little bit able to introduce more innovative practices into your operation can go a long way. So among the things we've been talking about this week are helping people recognize when they're in situations that are significantly uncertain, when they've got new businesses they need to pursue or new markets to explore, and getting comfortable with practices that are more suitable to those highly uncertain environments relative to the more understandable environments that they operate in quite frequently. We talked a lot about building an innovation system in your company, and that includes having processes for generating innovations, managing your portfolios of opportunities, cutting things off that don't look as though they're going to be promising, having a good process for disengagement, and planning when the main job is discovering what the answer needs to be rather than trying to prove that you were right. So I think it's really helping people understand that there's a real well-developed toolkit that they can use for innovation. It doesn't have to be this madly creative thing where everybody's running around in painter's pants and backwards baseball caps. It can be something that regular managers can learn to manage and approach and measure and do in a very systematic and disciplined way.
Fine. So let's continue with the third question, Rita. How is the crisis affecting over innovation and over the role of companies' leaders?
Well, when you think about what the crisis has done to companies, it's created a number of differences than I would say we had before. Before there was, certainly in Spain, there was a huge amount of optimism. I mean, in our journals, people were writing about how Spain was becoming the new mecca for immigration, and it was the hot new place to be. So I think it's caused people to really suffer a lack of confidence. They feel, well, were we wrong? Did we make the wrong decisions? Did we get carried away? So I think the first effect has been to cause people to question what came before, and was that not the right thing? And so I think there's been a period of people stopping reacting to the crisis. Obviously, for some companies, it's meant layoffs, it's meant downsizing, it's meant some pretty tough decisions. And I think we're sort of at the beginning of the end of that phase, and I think the better companies are now realizing that the world has changed, and that you can either moan about that and remain stuck and remain bitter and twisted about the fact that things don't look as nice as they did in 2007, or you can say, well, the world's changed, and that itself creates opportunities. When you have a downturn like this, it upsets the prevailing order. So companies that in better times might not have looked at a Spanish company as a supplier are now maybe open to the idea if you've got an innovative solution. I think it's created the motivation to find new and better ways to do things, and that in turn creates opportunities. And finally, I think what companies are starting to realize now is that you can't stop investing in growth. And as the Chamber in Navarra has found, companies are hungry to invest in their people again and invest in their capabilities again. So I think although it's been, very difficult, it's been painful, it's been hard to realize that what you thought was going to be a tree that grew to the sky has limits. I think there is some positive coming out of it. And I also think one of the things I'm observing is there's a whole new generation of leaders who are just kind of coming into their own as the economy hit, who are much more willing to say, okay, the old ways are no longer the way the world is, so let's pick up and move on. I also think the last thing I would say is that growth is really back on the agenda. I mean, my phone's ringing all the time. Companies are very interested in growth now, and you can't ignore that. So as people start looking for growth, they're going to be looking for innovative approaches to resolving the pressures that they're still under.
Okay, great. So as far as the Navarrian participants of the group is concerned, could you sum up more of the roadmap that you are assessing to the program participants to follow?
Mm-hmm. So we designed the program in Navarra with a mix of what we've always done with this program in its incarnation in the United States, but really trying to tailor it to the needs of the participants that we have here. And when we design a program like this, we always like to think about what do they need to do to get ready? So what do the participants need to do to get ready for this kind of experience? How do they mentally prepare themselves? Then, of course, the week in residence that they're here, a very careful mix of activities. And the next phase will be how we help support them as they try to implement these ideas in their own companies. So we always try to think of these things as a journey rather than an event. And that's a pretty critical stream of thoughts. In the pre-work, there are a number of things that we do that are standard. So we have each participant prepare what we call a personal case, which is the teaching case mainly for the application of the concepts in the course. And we give them a very structured approach to preparing this personal case. So they think of an issue that's important to their company. They involve others in the organization to develop the case itself. They prepare a formal written case write-up. They talk about what solution would they like, who do they want to get involved in the solution, and what would a successful outcome look like. And so it's a way of getting them to think about what they're working on in a very disciplined way. That we also give them some short pre-readings to sort of spark their thought process and advise them to clear their calendars, how best to do a program like this. And in the case of the Navarra program, very creatively, we worked closely with a gentleman who provided English instruction, because although the participants here all speak very good English, they don't use it on a regular basis. And so it takes a little while to get comfortable again with business level language and business level English. And so that was, I thought, very useful, very creative. And for us to support that, what we did in advance was send along documentation of all the key concepts so that we made sure we had good translations of all the key words and all the key frameworks so that there was a minimum of confusion when we actually got here. And then during the program, we do a number of things to encourage really deep learning. Every morning we start off with some time for reflection, where we spend time thinking about the concepts that we went over the day before, where we really try to reinforce some of those key learnings. So, if you missed something, perhaps when it was first introduced, it gives you the chance to think about it later. We've been very attentive to each participant's learning style, and in this particular class, about half of the participants are what we call reflectors, people that need some time to absorb ideas and let them sink in, but when they do accept them, they accept them very deeply. We also devote time every day to reflections on the personal cases, where people work with each other to come to some kind of solution to the case, or at least a next step that might make sense for the case. And that's each day we prepare them with specific instructions on how to use the material in the course to apply to their case. So we do that. We also bring in outside guests. So in addition to the academic faculty, we've had people from IDEO. This afternoon, as the course moves on, we'll have a gentleman from Air Products who've actually used the ideas in practice. So we hope to have a nice mix of theory and people that have studied these things with people that have, been out in the real world making these things work. So we think that's really, really important. And then we also don't lecture very much. Most of our work is done in an interactive format in the week itself. So we might give a short example of a framework, so say a way of putting together an opportunity, and then we have people work together or work on their own to apply it actually in the classrooms. We do an awful lot of interactive in-class exercises. And then, of course, there's the social element of the program. We have a lovely lunch every day where people get to take a break from the classroom and discuss. We have a couple of evening events which are really special, and that contributes to the networking and the sense of being part of a learning community. As the course finishes, we're going to be exploring, obviously, implementation plans. So for each of the cases, we're going to have each person leave with a specific action implementation plans. We're also going to be looking into providing additional perhaps remote lecture support, backing people up with online social media connections. So we're very interested in seeing this process continue so that people can follow up with the learning that they began here and continue to work with their network of people that they've now learned to know and trust.
Good, great, thank you very much. And yeah, we would like, the last question is just about your Navarran experience here. So we love to have here a faculty from Columbia Business School, as you are, and we would like to know, how do you feel Navarra, how do you feel people from Navarra, and how was that?
Okay, great. So you ask me what it's like to be here in Navarra. It's fantastic. I've never been here before. Pamplona is just beautiful. I mean, I didn't know what I was expecting, but it's lovelier than I expected and quite compact. The people have been very generous with their time, and we felt very well looked after. Of course, there's some things that do always surprise you when you go to a different culture. So, you know, in America, we would never have the luxury of a long lunch. We would certainly dinner, you know, in America is 6:15 in the afternoon. Here, they're just sort of wrapping up lunch at that time, so obviously the schedule's a bit different. The thing I've been very struck by here is how intensely people feel about the importance of the region and how much cohesiveness there is in their view of the region's potential. I was intrigued to see that there's real conscious effort being made to transition from what I'll call more old economy style companies and frameworks to something that's much more new economy, but it's being done in a really practical way, and I was very struck by that. In terms of the learning, of course, you know, Americans have different tolerances for certain things than the people here do. I used one example of a case of symbolism, and several people came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, that would never work here. You'd get fired if you did that." So clearly there's some things that are a bit of a surprise, but I have to say it's really been a pleasant experience, and if I'm lucky at all, we'll be invited back.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Rita, for your time.